Echoes in the cosmos. The static in Eris's headset, usually a soothing ocean of white noise, felt like sandpaper on her nerves. Weeks she'd dedicated, a digital diviner parsing the cosmic microwave background radiation, hunting echoes of the universe's genesis. The vast majority, 99.999%, mirrored the standard model perfectly. Smooth, consistent, the fading thermal fingerprint of the Big Bang.it was that fractional remainder, the tantalizing 0.001%, that chained her to the screen, fueled by stale coffee and the fragile hope of anomaly. She tweaked the frequency filter, pursuing a phantom distortion shimmering within the radiation bath, an act akin to grasping smoke, forever just beyond reach. Her peers dismissed it as pareidolia, the mind's trick of conjuring form from chaos. Confirmation bias, Eris. Dr. Elmsworth had declared with patronizing camaraderie, "So intent on uncovering something revolutionary, you're inventing it whole cloth." But Eris was certain of what she perceived, what she heard. This wasn't a visual glitch. It was a subtle modulation rippling through the radio waves, an ordered arrangement buried beneath the universal hum. A configuration. Could it be a message? She fed the data into another algorithm, designed to isolate recurring motifs. The results shocked her like a cold plunge. A sophisticated, decidedly unnatural sequence stood out from the background noise. It seemed contrived, impossible. "No way," she whispered, fingers dancing across the keyboard. She scrutinized the data origin, recalibrated the satellite parameters, reviewed atmospheric interference models. Everything checked out. The signal was legitimate, emanating from the very boundary of the observable cosmos. Eris preserved the data and leaned back, her pulse thrumming a frantic rhythm. This was the sort of discovery that could overturn cosmology, that could demonstrate, well, what exactly? That a presence and intelligence existed at the universe's inception, wielding technology incomprehensible to us. The implications loomed, both vast and terrifying. Presenting her findings at the weekly astrophysics seminar proved to be an error. Dr. Elmsworth, predictably, led the charge of dismissal. "Eris, with all due respect, the CMB is notoriously susceptible to anomalies. Might this be a form of gravitational distortion? Perhaps a quasar masked by intervening matter." "I've accounted for gravitational effects, Doctor," Eris countered, her voice betraying a slight tremor. "And the signal's spectral signature bears no resemblance to any known quasar. It possesses structure, intent." Professor Davies, normally an ally, interjected. "Intent? A considerable leap, Eris. Remember Occam's razor. The simplest explanation holds the greatest probability." The seminar room suddenly felt claustrophobic, the air thick with doubt. Eris wrestled with her notes, attempting to convey the signal's complexity, its inherent improbability of arising from natural phenomena. Yet, the more she elaborated, the more tangled her explanations became, dissolving into a morass of technicalities. The faces around the table remained skeptical, politely unconvinced. "Thank you, Eris," Dr. Elmsworth concluded, cutting her short. "Interesting speculation. Further investigation may be required." Mortified, Eris gathered her belongings and retreated, the weight of their incredulity pressing down. Back in her office, she replayed the seminar in her mind, scrutinizing every word, every gesture. She should have been clearer, more succinct. She should have anticipated their objections and constructed stronger rebuttals. But, truth be told, she hadn't anticipated such resistance. She'd envisioned shared astonishment, eagerness to delve into the discovery's ramifications. Instead, she felt adrift, a solitary voice echoing in a vacuum. She dove back into the data, determined to unearth unassailable proof, something to extinguish their doubts. She sharpened the signal, minimized the noise, and funneled it through a battery of intricate algorithms of her own design as she observed the screen. A shiver traced its way down her spine. Nestled within the signal, nearly undetectable, was a sequence of prime numbers. A fundamental language, unmistakable evidence of intelligent origin. Someone, somewhere, was attempting communication. That night, Eris remained, the hours melting away, fueled by caffeine and a growing disquiet. The university lay silent. Save for the drone of the ventilation and the staccato rhythm of her typing, she felt exposed, vulnerable. She failed to notice the dark sedan parked across the street, its tinted windows mirroring the streetlights like empty sockets. Inside, two figures sat motionless, their faces lost in shadow. Point one. A woman with close-cropped hair and an unyielding gaze raised a pair of high-powered binoculars. "That's her," she stated, her voice a gravelly whisper. "Dr. Eris Thorne, astrophysicist. Lives and breathes her work. Textbook type A." The other, a man bearing a scar that cleaved his left eyebrow, grunted. "And the signal? Potentially disruptive. If her claims hold true, it could destabilize the established order." "The obsidian hand does not tolerate instability," the man replied, his voice like honed steel. "Maintain surveillance. Report anything unusual." The woman lowered the binoculars, activating a small device on the dashboard. A red light flickered to life, indicating their surveillance system was active. "She'll never know we're there," the woman said, a predatory smile touching her lips. "We'll be specters, observing her every breath." Back in her office, Eris fixed her gaze on the prime number sequence, her thoughts spiraling. Who dispatched the signal? What was their intent? And why reveal themselves now? A momentary flicker on her monitor seized her attention. A brief, almost imperceptible distortion in her webcam feed. A software glitch? Or something more ominous? She dismissed it as paranoia, the byproduct of excessive caffeine and sleep deprivation. But as she continued her work, the feeling of being watched intensified. She glanced nervously over her shoulder, half expecting to confront someone lurking behind her. The university security cameras, she recalled. Cameras populated the hallways, the parking area, even the common spaces of the astrophysics wing. She could review the footage, ascertain if anyone had been loitering near her office. She accessed the security system interface on her computer and began scrolling through the recent recordings. Everything appeared mundane. Students immersed in late-night studies, cleaning staff performing their duties, an occasional security officer on patrol. Then, she caught it at a fleeting break in the stream, a few critical seconds excised from the recording, and in the moments prior to the interruption, a shadowy form lurking in the corridor outside her office, its features obscured by the gloom. Eris froze, her veins turning to ice water. She wasn't imagining it, someone was observing her. Someone was aware of the signal, and they were determined to prevent her from uncovering the truth. The obsidian hand reaches. The insistent buzzing of the intercom sliced through the pre-dawn quiet. Eris, already bleary-eyed from wrestling with recalcitrant algorithms, ignored it. Probably a wrong number. It buzzed again. Longer this time, laced with an impatient edge. Frowning, she padded over to the wall-mounted unit, her bare feet cold on the polished concrete floor of her loft apartment. "Yes?" she mumbled, her voice thick with sleep. A distorted voice crackled back. "Package delivery for Dr. Thorne." Suspicious. She hadn't ordered anything. "Leave it downstairs. I'll pick it up later. Requires signature. And it's temperature sensitive." The voice held a note of finality. Eris hesitated. Temperature sensitive? Could be a new component for her receiver array. Sighing, she relented. "Fine. I'm coming down." She pulled on jeans and a faded MIT sweatshirt, her mind already back to the cascading prime number sequence. She reached for the door. A prickle of unease skittered across her skin. The insistent buzzing, the late delivery. It felt wrong. She glanced around the apartment, her gaze lingering on the whiteboard covered in equations, the stacks of scientific journals threatening to topple, the oscilloscope humming softly in the corner. Her sanctuary. Reaching the lobby, Eris found two men in dark, nondescript suits waiting beside the entrance. Neither held a package. One had a face like carved granite, the other a forced, unnatural smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Dr. Thorne?" the granite-faced man asked, his voice devoid of warmth. "Yes." Eris's hand instinctively tightened on the small wrench she'd absent-mindedly grabbed from her toolbox. "We need you to come with us." "I didn't order anything," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Who are you?" The smiling man stepped forward. "We just need to ask you some questions. It will only take a few minutes." Eris's mind raced. This wasn't a delivery. This was something else, something far more sinister. She feigned confusion. "Questions about what?" "I'm very busy." She took a step back, ostensibly to reach for the security desk phone, but her fingers were already fumbling for her keys in her pocket. Granite Face moved with surprising speed, blocking her path. "We can do this the easy way or the hard way, Doctor." The adrenaline hit her like a jolt of electricity. She wasn't going to be able to talk her way out of this. Years of theoretical physics hadn't prepared her for hand-to-hand combat. But she wasn't helpless. Thinking fast, Eris raised the wrench high and brought it down on the fire alarm box beside the door. The shrill, deafening alarm shattered the tense silence. The men flinched, momentarily stunned. Eris didn't hesitate. She darted past them, heading back towards the elevators. "Stop her!" Granite Face roared, his voice barely audible above the alarm. Eris punched the up button repeatedly, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The elevator seemed to take an eternity. She glanced back. The men were gaining on her. The elevator doors finally slid open. She leaped inside and slammed the door close button, her heart pounding against her ribs like a trapped bird as the doors began to close. She saw Granite Face lunge, his hand reaching for the opening. The doors slammed shut just before he could reach her, severing his tie. Eris watched him through the gap, his face contorted with rage. Back in her apartment, Eris barricaded the door with a heavy bookshelf, her hands shaking. She knew they wouldn't give up. She had to get out, and she had to leave a message, something that would tell someone what was happening. She grabbed a marker and, on the back of the whiteboard, scribbled a series of seemingly random numbers and symbols, interspersed with snippets of the prime number sequence. She'd been analyzing .it looked like gibberish, but embedded within it was a coded message, a desperate plea for help, a breadcrumb trail. Then, grabbing her laptop and a backpack filled with essential equipment, she slipped out the fire escape, disappearing into the pre-dawn gloom. ****. In a dimly lit, opulent office overlooking the city, Silas Blackwood listened in stony silence as Granite Face stammered his report. She got away, sir." Triggered the fire alarm. It was chaotic. Blackwood's eyes, cold and piercing, narrowed. "Chaotic? You were tasked with a simple extraction. A scientist. And you failed." "She was resourceful, sir. More than we anticipated." Blackwood rose from his leather chair, his movements fluid and predatory. He walked to the window, gazing out at the sprawling cityscape, a web of power and influence he meticulously controlled. Resourceful. An interesting quality, but ultimately irrelevant. He turned back to Granite Face, his voice dangerously soft. "This woman, Dr. Thorne, possesses information that threatens the very foundation of our order. Her research must be silenced, permanently." He paused, his gaze unwavering. "Find her. Correct your mistake. And this time leave no room for error." He turned back to the window and dismissed the pair. The city lights glittered below, indifferent to the machinations of the man who sought to control them. He tapped a silver pen against his teeth. "Resourceful," he murmured to himself. "I do so enjoy a challenge. A ranger awakens." The wind carried the scent of sage and dust across the Texas plains, a familiar comfort to Chuck Norris as he sat on his porch, whittling a piece of mesquite wood. The setting sun painted the sky in hues of orange and purple. A daily masterpiece he rarely missed. A lone crow landed on the fence post, its black eyes gleaming in the fading light. Chuck paused. His knife stilled. He didn't trust coincidences. The crow cawed once, sharply, then dropped a small, tightly rolled piece of parchment at his feet before taking flight again. Chuck watched it disappear over the horizon, then bent down to retrieve the message. It was coded. A series of numbers and symbols etched onto the aged paper. He recognized the cipher immediately. A relic from a shared past. "Damn, Miguel," he muttered under his breath, a ghost of a smile playing on his lips, still using the old tricks. He went inside, the scent of leather and gun oil filling his nostrils. Under the warm glow of a kerosene lamp, he spread the parchment on his workbench, his calloused fingers tracing the symbols. Years hadn't dulled his memory. He quickly deciphered the message. Thorn compromised. Obsidian hand active. Repeat. Obsidian hand. Seek and protect. Blood debt. The words hit him like a physical blow. The obsidian hand, a network of shadows, whispered about in hushed tones, their influence stretching into the highest echelons of power. He'd crossed paths with them before. A lifetime ago, in a dusty corner of Southeast Asia. Miguel, a wiry Filipino with a heart of gold and a knack for disappearing, had saved his life then, pulling him from the jaws of a trap set by the hand. A debt he never forgot. Chuck leaned back in his chair, the gears turning in his mind. Thorn. The name meant nothing to him. But Miguel wouldn't risk sending a message like this unless the situation was dire, and the mention of the obsidian hand, that changed everything. This wasn't just a rescue mission. It was a war brewing. He remembered Miguel's face, etched with concern, as he patched up Chuck's wounds all those years ago. "They're everywhere, amigo," Miguel had said, his voice barely a whisper. "Like shadows, they slip through the cracks. They want power, and they'll crush anyone who gets in their way." Chuck had dismissed it then, focusing on the immediate threat, but Miguel had been right. The obsidian hand was a cancer, slowly metastasizing, poisoning everything it touched. A sigh escaped his lips, a sound lost in the vast silence of the ranch. He'd hoped to leave that life behind. The constant violence, the endless battles. He'd found peace here. A simple existence that suited him. But some debts couldn't be ignored, and some evils couldn't be left unchecked. He rose from the chair. The decision made. The ranger was awakening. He moved with a practiced efficiency, his movements economical and precise from the gun safe. He retrieved his customized Colt 1911. Its grip worn smooth from years of use. He checked the magazine, the cartridges gleaming under the lamplight. Then, he selected a sturdy leather holster and strapped it to his side. Next, he grabbed a tactical vest, slipping it over his worn denim shirt. Into its pockets, he placed spare magazines, a first aid kit, and a small, but powerful, flashlight. He packed a duffel bag with essentials. A change of clothes, a multi-tool, a satellite phone, and a protein bars. He added a worn photograph of his late wife, a silent promise to return home safe. He didn't know what he was walking into, but he knew he had to be prepared for anything. The Texas night had deepened, the stars blazing in the inky sky. He walked out to his truck, a trusty Ford F-150, its engine rumbling to life with a reassuring growl. He glanced back at the ranch house, a solitary beacon in the darkness. It was more than just a home. It was a sanctuary, a symbol of the life he was fighting to protect. He shifted the truck into gear and pulled onto the dusty road, the headlights cutting through the darkness. The city awaited. Eris Thorn awaited, and the obsidian hand, unknowingly, had just awakened a sleeping giant. He gripped the steering wheel tighter, his jaw set. This time, the shadows would find themselves facing the light, sanctuary among the stars. Dust devils danced in the headlights as Eris's beat-up Subaru coughed its way up the winding, unpaved road. The engine whined in protest, a mechanical echo of her own anxiety. Each bump sent a jolt through the chassis, rattling her teeth and the precious cargo in the back. A collection of oscilloscopes, spectrum analyzers, and a laptop that had seen better days, all jury-rigged to run off a hefty portable generator. The observatory, a relic from a bygone era of astronomical enthusiasm, loomed against the star-strewn canvas of the Texas night. Its once gleaming dome was now a patchwork of rust and peeling paint. A silent testament to neglect, perfect seclusion was paramount. She wrestled the car to a stop, the engine sputtering its last before dying with a sigh of metallic fatigue. Silence descended, broken only by the chirping of crickets and the distant howl of a coyote. Eris took a deep breath, the dry, desert air stinging her nostrils. It smelled of dust and forgotten dreams. Good to know. One would think to look for her here. Unloading was a chore. The equipment was heavy, and her slight frame strained under the weight. Muttering under her breath about the impracticality of needing a Faraday cage in the middle of nowhere, she hauled the last of the components inside. The observatory's interior was cavernous and cold. The air hung thick with the smell of mildew and guano. A thick layer of dust coated everything, illuminated only by the narrow beam of her headlamp. She found a relatively clean corner near the base of the massive telescope mount. Its gears were frozen, the once polished brass now dull with tarnish. She spread a tarp, a fragile barrier against the grime, and began to assemble her makeshift lab. Cables snaked across the floor, connecting the various instruments in a chaotic web. The generator coughed to life outside, filling the space with a low hum that vibrated through the concrete floor. The data Thorne had sent was encrypted, a jumbled mess of numbers and symbols. That meant nothing on the surface. She stared at the cascading lines on the laptop screen. Her brow furrowed in concentration. It was like looking at a foreign language written in an alphabet she'd never seen. "Come on, Eris, think," she muttered, chewing on her lower lip. Thorne wouldn't send this if it wasn't important, but what is it? Hours bled into one another. The glow of the laptop screen was the only light in the vast darkness. She ran decryption algorithms, tweaked parameters, and chased dead ends. Frustration mounted. Every failed attempt felt like a tiny hammer blow against her resolve. She knew the obsidian hand wouldn't give her this much time. Finally, with a frustrated sigh, she leaned back in her rickety folding chair. She needed help, someone who could see past the surface, someone who understood the dark corners of the digital world. There was only one person she trusted enough to ask. She pulled out her satellite phone, its antenna jutting out like a defiant finger. After a few rings, a voice crackled to life on the other end. "Read." It was clipped, impatient. "Evelyn, it's Eris." A pause. "Eris Thorne? What in the name of Ada Lovelace are you doing calling me on a Saturday night? I was just about to start a binge of terrible reality TV. I need your help." Eris's voice was strained. "I've got something. A file. It's heavily encrypted. I can't crack it." "Encrypted how? Government grade? Alien technology? Don't tell me you finally made contact." Evelyn's tone was laced with her usual cynicism, but Eris detected a note of concern beneath the surface. "I don't know. It's complex, and I think I'm in danger." The skepticism vanished. "Danger? What kind of danger?" Eris hesitated. She didn't want to burden Evelyn with the full story, not over a potentially compromised line. "Let's just say some people are very interested in what I've been working on." "Interested enough to send you running for the hills?" "Something like that." Evelyn sighed, the sound crackling through the speaker. "All right, send me the file. Secure channel, of course." "And Eris?" "Yes. Don't do anything stupid. For once." "I'll try," Eris said, managing a weak smile. "Thanks, Evelyn." "Don't thank me yet. Just stay alive long enough for me to work my magic." The line went dead. Eris transferred the encrypted file to Evelyn through a series of proxy servers and encrypted tunnels, a digital labyrinth designed to obscure its origin. She felt a sliver of hope. Evelyn was the best. If anyone could unlock the secrets Thorne had entrusted to her, it was her. But as she stared out at the inky blackness beyond the observatory dome, she couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out. The stars, usually a source of comfort and wonder, now seemed like cold, indifferent eyes watching her every move. She was alone, hunted, and trapped between the secrets of the past and the uncertain dangers of the future. All she had was a flickering generator, a pile of outdated equipment, and the unwavering loyalty of a sarcastic hacker on the other side of the world. It would have to be enough. The trail of breadcrumbs. The desert wind tasted of sand and secrets. Chuck Norris spat, the gritty dryness clinging to his tongue like a bad memory. He stood on the edge of a cracked asphalt road, the setting sun painting long shadows that stretched across the scrub brush. His gaze was fixed on a dilapidated gas station a quarter-mile ahead, its neon sign flickering weakly, a dying insect buzzing in the vast emptiness. This was the place. According to his contact, a former spook with a penchant for conspiracy theories and cheap whiskey, a low-level Obsidian Hand operative named Benny Fingers Lupo occasionally surfaced here. Fingers wasn't privy to the grand scheme, but he ran errands, delivered messages, and knew who paid the bills. Enough of a thread to start unraveling the whole damn tapestry. Chuck walked, his gait deceptively casual, each step measured, each sense heightened that he noticed the glint of reflected sunlight off a window pane that shouldn't be reflecting anything, that he smelled the faint metallic tang of gun oil carried on the breeze, a sharp contrast to the sweet aroma of stale gasoline. 2 Sentinels. Likely, amateurs. He entered the gas station, the bell above the door tinkling a mournful tune. The interior was dimly lit, the air thick with dust and the scent of stale coffee. Behind the counter, a burly man with a shaved head and a neck tattoo of a snarling wolf eyed him with suspicion. The other one was lurking in the shadows near the back, a lanky kid with nervous eyes and a cheap handgun tucked into his waistband. "Just passing through," Chuck said, his voice a low rumble. He grabbed a bottle of water from a dusty cooler, the label faded and peeling. "Need some directions." The wolf man grunted. "Directions to where?" "Anywhere Fingers Lupo might be hanging around." The wolfman's eyes narrowed. The kid in the back tensed, his hand inching towards his weapon. Chuck sighed inwardly. He preferred a quiet conversation, but these boys were itching for a fight. "Never heard of him." The wolfman growled, reaching under the counter. Chuck twisted the cap off the water bottle, the plastic crinkling in the sudden silence. He took a slow, deliberate sip. "That's a shame that he owes me money." The wolfman pulled out a sawed-off shotgun, its twin barrels gleaming dully. The kid scrambled forward, brandishing his pistol. Chuck moved. Time seemed to slow down. He tossed the water bottle, the liquid arcing through the air, distracting the wolfman for a fraction of a second. In that sliver of time, Chuck closed the distance, his hand a blur as he disarmed the kid, the pistol clattering to the floor. He spun, using the kid's momentum to hurl him into the shelves lining the back wall, sending cans of motor oil and windshield wiper fluid cascading down. The wolfman roared and swung the shotgun. Chuck ducked, the blast of buckshot tearing through the air. Where his head had been, he grabbed the shotgun barrel, wrenching it upwards. The wolfman's strength no match for his. He slammed the butt of the shotgun into the wolfman's temple, the man collapsing in a heap behind the counter. The kid, dazed but still game, stumbled to his feet. He lunged at Chuck with a rusty wrench he'd grabbed from the debris. Chuck sidestepped the blow, catching the kid's wrist and twisting it sharply. The kid screamed, dropping the wrench. Chuck delivered a swift kick to the kid's midsection, sending him sprawling. He stood over them, his breathing even, his face impassive. "Where is he?" he asked, his voice dangerously quiet. The kid, clutching his stomach, whimpered. The wolfman groaned. Trying to sit up, Chuck picked up the sawed-off shotgun and aimed it at the ceiling. He pulled the trigger. The blast echoed through the gas station, sending plaster dust raining down. "Last chance," he said. The kid, his eyes wide with terror, finally cracked. He's at the old lumber mill, just outside of town. He's got a trailer there." Chuck nodded. He holstered his own weapon, a Colt 1911 that had seen more action than most soldiers. "Thank you for your cooperation." He left them groaning on the floor, the stench of gunpowder and fear hanging heavy in the air. The lumber mill was a skeleton of rusted metal and rotting wood, a monument to forgotten industry. The trailer, tucked away behind a pile of decaying timber, looked equally desolate. Chuck approached cautiously, his senses on high alert. He kicked open the trailer door, the hinges screaming in protest. Inside, Benny Fingers, Lupo sat at a rickety table, his face pale, a needle mark prominent on his arm. He looked up, his eyes unfocused. "Who the hell are you?" Fingers slurred. Chuck grabbed him by the collar, hauling him to his feet. "The man who's going to ask you some questions. And you're going to answer them." Fingers trembled, his pupils dilated. "I don't know anything." Chuck's grip tightened. The obsidian hand. What are they planning? Fear flickered in Fingers' eyes, briefly eclipsing the drug-induced haze. I can't tell you. They'll kill me." "They'll kill you anyway," Chuck said, his voice cold. "Unless you tell me what I want to know." He leaned in close, his gaze unwavering. "They're after a scientist, right? A woman." "Eris Thorne." Fingers gasped, his body trembling violently. "Yeah. Thorne. They want the data she has. Something about an alien signal. They said it could change everything." "Change everything how?" Fingers shook his head, tears welling in his eyes. "I don't know. They just said it was important. Top priority. Get the data, silence Thorne. That's all I know, I swear." Chuck studied him, his face unreadable. He believed him. Fingers was just a pawn, a disposable tool. But his information confirmed Chuck's suspicions. The obsidian hand wasn't just interested in silencing Eris Thorne. They were after something much bigger, something alien, and whatever it was worth killing for. Deciphering the cosmos. Eris hunched over Evelyn's jury-rigged computer setup, the glow of the multiple monitors painting her face in an ethereal light. Empty coffee cups and crumpled takeout containers littered the cramped basement room, a testament to their sleepless efforts. The alien signal, a chaotic jumble of frequencies and patterns, had been mocking them for days. "Damn it," Eris muttered, pushing a stray strand of hair behind her ear. "There's a repeating sequence within this subsection, but it's shifted. Like a key signature change in music, but with prime numbers." Evelyn, perched on a precarious stack of milk crates, typed furiously. "Think of it as a cosmic fugue, Eris. Gotta find the counterpoint." Her fingers danced across the keyboard, bypassing firewalls and rerouting data streams. "Almost got a clean feed from the deep space array. Maybe something there can help." Suddenly, the screen flickered, resolving into a series of complex geometric patterns. Eris gasped, her eyes widening behind her thick glasses. "Evelyn, look! It's starting to resolve." The patterns shifted, coalescing into a three-dimensional blueprint. Intricate lines intersected, forming a device of impossible angles and shimmering energy fields. A schematic. But for what? Eris's voice trembled with excitement. It's some kind of spatial manipulator. A device capable of warping spacetime. Creating wormholes, maybe? Or something we can't even comprehend yet. She launched into a rapid-fire explanation, her words tumbling over each other. The energy requirements are astronomical, but the principles are revolutionary. It would change everything we know about physics, about the universe itself. Evelyn, usually cynical, stared at the screen, her mouth slightly agape. "Holy crap, Eris. You weren't kidding. This is bigger than sliced bread." She snapped out of her reverie. "But who sent it? And why?" Eris shook her head, oblivious to the potential danger. "I don't know, but we have to understand it. We have to build it virtually, at least. See what it can do." Her fingers flew across the keyboard, inputting commands, simulating energy flows. Meanwhile, in a sterile, high-tech office overlooking the Washington, D.C. skyline, Silas Blackwood watched Eris's progress on a secure monitor. The schematic glowed on his screen, a silent testament to the scientist's breakthrough. His face was a mask of cold calculation. "She's decoded it," he said, his voice a low, gravelly rasp. "Thorne understands what the device is capable of." A woman in a black suit stood rigidly before him. "Our team is ready to move, sir. We can secure the data and eliminate the threat." Blackwood steepled his fingers, his gaze fixed on the shimmering blueprint. "Eliminate Thorne and the hacker. Leave no trace. We cannot risk this information falling into the wrong hands. The future of this world depends on it." He paused, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. "And retrieve the hard drives. All of them. They belong to us." Back in the basement, Eris was completely absorbed in her work, oblivious to the danger closing in. She ran another simulation, the virtual space-time manipulator humming with simulated power. A small tear appeared in the fabric of the screen, a swirling vortex of light and energy. "Evelyn, look!" Eris exclaimed, her voice filled with wonder. "It's working virtually, at least it's creating a localized distortion field. Like a tiny rip in reality." Suddenly, the power flickered, plunging the basement into darkness. The computers died, their screens going black. Evelyn swore. "Damn it! What was that?" Before Eris could answer, the door at the top of the stairs splintered inward, revealing two figures silhouetted against the dim light of the hallway. They were dressed in black tactical gear, their faces obscured by masks. Obsidian hand, Evelyn hissed, grabbing a heavy wrench from a nearby workbench. "Looks like our cosmic fugue just hit a sour note." The figures moved with practiced efficiency, their weapons raised. Eris stumbled back, her mind racing. She knew, with a chilling certainty, that they weren't just after the data. They were after her, and they wouldn't hesitate to silence her permanently. The universe had whispered its secrets to her, and now, those secrets had painted a target on her back. Assault on the observatory. The reinforced steel door groaned, then buckled inward like tin foil under a hydraulic press. Blackwood's team, clad in matte black tactical gear, swarmed into the observatory's main level, their assault rifles spitting controlled bursts of fire. Glass shattered, consoles sparked, and the sterile air filled with the acrid scent of ozone and gunpowder. Eris screamed, a high-pitched, involuntary sound that was quickly swallowed by the cacophony. She huddled behind the central support column of the massive reflecting telescope. Evelyn squeezed beside her, both of them paralyzed with fear. Eris's meticulously organized world, the world of equations and cosmic wonders, had been violently invaded by chaos. A voice, amplified by a bullhorn, cut through the din. "Eris Thorne, Evelyn Hayes, surrender and you will not be harmed." Eris peeked around the column. The speaker, a tall figure with a shaved head and eyes like chips of obsidian, stood at the head of the assault team. She knew that voice, knew that promise was a lie. Outside, a dust devil danced across the access road. A black SUV, its engine idling roughly, sat 100 yards away. The driver shifted impatiently, tapping a gloved hand against the steering wheel. Suddenly, the SUV lurched forward, tires spitting gravel, and slammed into the security gate, tearing. Through the flimsy barrier like paper, Chuck Norris emerged, a figure carved from granite and determination. He moved with a speed that belied his age, a silent promise of retribution etched on his face. Two of Blackwood's men broke from the main group and leveled their weapons at Norris. He didn't break stride. At a flash of silver, too quick to follow, and two silenced pistols clattered to the asphalt. Both men crumpled, clutching their throats, crimson blooming on their dark uniforms. Inside the observatory, the firefight intensified. Eris, shaking uncontrollably, found herself propelled by a surge of adrenaline. She knew this place, every conduit, every emergency exit, every blind spot. Blackwood's men might have the guns, but she had the home field advantage. "Evelyn, the power grid!" she shouted, her voice surprisingly steady. Section Gamma. Circuit Breaker 7. Cut the lights. Evelyn, finally shaking off her initial terror, scrambled to obey. She crawled along the floor, dodging stray bullets, her fingers flying across the control panel. Outside, Norris engaged the remaining guards with brutal efficiency. He moved like a phantom, a whirlwind of fists and feet, disarming and incapacitating his opponents with ruthless precision. One man, attempting to flank him, found himself lifted off the ground by a single, perfectly placed kick to the sternum. Inside, the lights flickered, then died, plunging the observatory into near darkness. Red emergency lights bathed the scene in an eerie glow, casting long, distorted shadows. The advantage had shifted to Blackwood's team. Momentarily disoriented, hesitated, Eris seized the opportunity. "The telescope controls!" she yelled to Norris, her voice echoing in the darkness. "Use the azimuth drive. It can crush them against the wall." Norris, already inside the building, understood instantly. He vaulted over a shattered console and sprinted towards the massive telescope, its lens a dark, unblinking eye staring at the heavens. Blackwood, his face contorted with rage, barked orders into his comm unit. "Find Thorn. Secure the device, and kill Norris." Two men peeled off from the main group and began systematically searching the shadows. Eris, using her knowledge of the observatory's layout, led them on a cat-and-mouse chase through the darkened corridors. She triggered an emergency fire suppression system, flooding a narrow hallway with foam, momentarily blinding one of her pursuers. Norris, meanwhile, had reached the telescope controls. He grabbed the lever for the azimuth drive and slammed it into gear. The massive structure groaned, then began to rotate with ponderous speed. Two of Blackwood's men, caught completely by surprise, found themselves pinned against the wall, the relentless pressure of the rotating telescope squeezing the air from their lungs. They screamed, a desperate, strangled sound that was quickly silenced by the grinding of metal. Blackwood watched in horror as his carefully planned assault began to unravel. He had underestimated Thorn, and he had drastically underestimated Chuck. Norris, Eris, emboldened by her small victories, felt a flicker of something akin to hope. This wasn't her world. This wasn't her fight, but she was fighting nonetheless. She grabbed a heavy wrench from a nearby workbench, her knuckles white as she gripped the cold steel. The observatory, once a sanctuary of science and discovery, had become a battlefield, and Eris Thorn, the astrophysicist who preferred the company of stars to people, was ready to defend it. Turning the tide. The rifle clattered to the metal floor. The man who'd been wielding it now slumped against the control panel, clutching his shattered kneecap. Chuck Norris hadn't even broken a sweat. He moved with a speed that defied his age, a whirlwind of controlled violence that left the remaining Obsidian Hand operatives scrambling for cover. "Eris, find something to jam their comms. Now," Chuck barked, his voice a low growl that cut through the echoing alarms. Eris, still reeling from the near miss with the energy weapon, nodded frantically, her mind, usually a chaotic jumble of astrophysical equations, now focused with laser precision. She darted between the consoles, her fingers flying across the keyboards. I think I can overload the local network. It's a messy solution, but it should fry their headsets and disrupt any incoming signals." Chuck grunted his acknowledgement, already moving towards the next threat. A hulking figure emerged from the shadows of the telescope housing, wielding a vibro blade that hummed with lethal energy. "Blackwood wants you alive, old man." The mercenary snarled, his voice amplified by a modulator in his helmet. "But he didn't say anything about keeping you pretty." Chuck's response was a swift kick to the solar plexus, followed by a disarming maneuver so fast it was almost invisible. The vibroblade clattered to the ground, and the mercenary doubled over, gasping for air. Chuck didn't give him a chance to recover. The precise chop to the back of the neck rendered him unconscious. Eris, meanwhile, had managed to access the observatory's internal security system. "I've sealed off Sector Gamma," she announced, her voice tight with adrenaline. and I rerouted the coolant lines to the ventilation shafts in Sector Beta. It won't kill them, but it'll make things uncomfortable. Chuck smirked, a rare and unsettling expression. Uncomfortable? I was hoping for inconvenient, but uncomfortable will do. He grabbed the discarded vibro blade, testing its weight in his hand. Let's see how they like their own toys. He moved with a purpose, a silent predator hunting his prey. He used the observatory's layout to his advantage, turning corridors into kill zones. One operative, attempting to flank him, found himself facing a sudden and unexpected shower of high-pressure nitrogen, courtesy of Eris rerouting the telescope's calibration system. Another blundered into a room where Eris had rigged the holographic projector to display a blinding strobe pattern, disorienting him long enough for Chuck to deliver a knockout blow. They're adapting, Eris yelled, monitoring the security feeds. They're using thermal imaging to bypass the coolant traps, and they have some kind of countermeasure against the strobes. Then we adapt too, Chuck replied. Unfazed, he tossed the vibro blade to Eris. Learn to use that. Now. Eris stared at the weapon, her eyes wide with apprehension. But I'm a scientist. I don't know how to fight. You're about to learn, Chuck said, his voice leaving no room for argument. Point the sharp end at the bad guys. And don't hesitate. He moved forward, drawing the remaining operatives away from Eris. He lured them into the main control room. A large, open space filled with consoles and monitors. It was a dangerous move, but it was also an opportunity. The room was Eris's domain, and she knew it better than anyone. While Chuck engaged the mercenaries in close combat, a brutal dance of fists and blades, Eris worked feverishly at the main console. She reconfigured the telescope's tracking system, turning the massive instrument into a makeshift weapon. Chuck, heads up, she shouted, her fingers flying across the keyboard. A section of the ceiling swung open, revealing the gaping maw of the telescope. A beam of focused infrared light, normally used for calibrating the instrument, lanced down, narrowly missing one of the mercenaries. The heat was intense, forcing them to scatter. Keep them moving, Chuck yelled, deflecting a blow with his forearm. Eris complied, manipulating the telescope's trajectory, sweeping the beam across the room like a deadly scythe. The mercenaries were forced to take cover. Their movements restricted. Chuck seized the opportunity. He disarmed one operative, using his own weapon against him. Another he slammed against a console, short-circuiting the system with the impact. The last one, panicked and disoriented, made a desperate lunge for Eris. He never reached her. Eris, remembering Chuck's instructions, raised the vibro blade. Her hand trembling, she closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and thrust the blade forward. The mercenary stumbled back, clutching his chest, a look of disbelief on his face. He crumpled to the floor. Eris stared at the blade, her hand still shaking. She had never killed anyone before. The weight of what she had done settled heavily on her shoulders. Chuck walked over to her, his face grim. You did what you had to do, he said, his voice surprisingly gentle. You protected yourself. You protected me. He paused, looking around the room at the carnage. They won't be coming back. The Obsidian Hand team was neutralized. For now, at least, Eris and Chuck had turned the tide. But Eris knew with a chilling certainty that this was just the beginning. Silas Blackwood wouldn't give up so easily, and the secrets hidden within the alien signal were far too dangerous to remain buried. Showdown at spacetime. It ends here, Norris. The amplified voice, echoing through the observatory, sent a tremor through Eris, a stark contrast to the desert's sweltering breath. It wasn't merely the declaration, but the chilling conviction woven into its timbre beside her. Amidst the debris field of their failed defense, Chuck remained unmoved, though his eyes narrowed, fixated on the main entrance as a figure materialized from the gloom, not Blackwood himself. The man who strode forth was a giant, a sculpted titan of muscle and menace. Yet, the voice, the imperious bearing, The palpable aura of predation at IT was undeniably Blackwood, a digital specter conjured by some advanced technology beyond Eris's immediate comprehension. Hiding, Silas. Chuck's voice was a gravelly rumble, devoid of emotion. He spared not a glance for the holographic apparition, his gaze unwavering on the physical embodiment of Blackwood's will. A matter of practicality, Norris. Why expose myself when a pawn will suffice? This instrument is here to facilitate matters. The projected Blackwood gestured with dismissive ease. Secure the device, neutralize resistance. A simple transaction. Eris's grip on the observation deck railing tightened until her knuckles gleamed bone-white. Focus, she reminded herself. This wasn't a stage play. It was a fight for survival. Her gaze flickered to the space-time manipulator, its low hum a counterpoint to the rising tension in the room. Its energy signature pulsed with dangerous inconsistency. That device, Eris began, a tremor in her voice. It's volatile. The energy matrix is unstable. Attempting to weaponize it risks. Risks what, Doctor? Blackwood's digital visage curled into a sneer. Unleashing unimaginable power? Precisely my intent. Chuck silenced her with a sharp tone. He doesn't care, Eris. Power is the only language they speak. He shifted, a coiled spring ready to unleash. Tell me, Silas, how many lives are you willing to immolate on the pyre of your ambition? Blackwood's chuckle was dry, hollow, devoid of genuine amusement. As many as required, Norris. The destiny of humanity hangs in the balance, and I alone can steer it. At the projection's silent command, the muscle-bound proxy surged forward, his speed belied his bulk. A whirlwind of fists and fury aimed squarely at Chuck. The clash was brutal, no elaborate techniques, no wasted motion, pure, untamed force against honed precision. Chuck met the initial onslaught head-on, parrying strikes that would have crippled with ease. Eris watched, transfixed and terrified, as the two combatants wrestled. The very air throbbed with each impact. The observatory groaned as the proxy slammed Chuck against a support column. A shower of dust cascaded from the ceiling. Chuck grunted, recovering swiftly. His counterattack a torrent of targeted blows. He exploited pressure points, nerve clusters, turning the proxy's raw strength against itself with clinical efficiency. But the proxy was implacable. He absorbed the punishment, his eyes vacant, his movements pre-programmed. He was a construct, animated by Blackwood's unwavering resolve. Eris knew she couldn't remain a spectator. Action was imperative. Her gaze darted back to the space-time manipulator. The energy reading soared at IT was spiraling towards a critical state. She bolted for the control panel, her fingers dancing across the keys. She had to stabilize the energy matrix or, failing that, initiate a shutdown sequence before it reached critical mass. But the alien code was impenetrable, and the system was overwhelmed. Error messages blinked in a disorienting cascade. Eris, get clear, Chuck bellowed, narrowly evading a blow that would have shattered his skull. She ignored him, her focus absolute. I can't just abandon it. Chuck, this thing is about to. Abruptly, the lights flickered erratically. The hum of the space-time manipulator intensified, escalating to a piercing shriek. The air crackled with palpable energy. Eris inhaled sharply, recognizing the signature. Singularity imminent, she shouted, backing away from the console. We have to evacuate. Chuck heard her, but he was ensnared, locked in a brutal grapple with the proxy. Escape was impossible. The proxy's grip was like a vice, his strength inhuman. Relentless. Blackwood's projection flickered, his face a mask of elation and apprehension. The culmination of my life's work, he rasped. Behold the dawn of a new world. Argument was a luxury she couldn't afford. She had to intervene. Improvising, she snatched a shard of twisted metal from the wreckage, a desperate gamble, her only option. She launched herself at the proxy, aiming for the exposed conduits that connected him to the holographic projector at a long shot, but severing the signal was their best hope. The instant the metal connected, a wave of energy exploded outward. The proxy convulsed, his body contorting violently. He released Chuck with a strangled roar, stumbling backward. The holographic Blackwood imploded in a shower of sparks. Silence descended, punctuated only by the frantic whirring of the space-time manipulator. Chuck, battered but alive, stared at Eris, his expression a complex mix of awe and concern. "What did you just do?" Eris swallowed, her heart hammering against her ribs. "I think I just cut Blackwood's puppet strings." Celebration was premature. The space-time manipulator trembled violently, its energy field expanding at an alarming rate. The very fabric of reality shimmered around it. "We have to go," Eris reiterated, her voice sharp with urgency. "Now, or we'll be consumed by a nascent black hole. Frozen in time." The air crackled with an energy that tasted like ozone and fear. The space-time manipulator hummed, a predatory lullaby threatening to swallow everything whole. Blackwood's hologram flickered. A malevolent grin stretched across his face. "Foolish. You can't comprehend the power you're trifling with. This device is beyond your grasp." Chuck ignored the monologue. His gaze was laser-focused on the device panel. The swirling vortex contained within its core a mesmerizing and terrifying sight. He moved with a speed that defied his age, a blur of denim and determination. The two remaining Obsidian Hand operatives, momentarily stunned by the proxy's sudden disintegration, reacted too late to Chuck's fist connected with the first goon's jaw, sending him sprawling. The second fumbled for his weapon, but Chuck's boot slammed into his wrist, a sickening crack echoing. In the confined space, "Eris, status report," Chuck barked, never taking his eyes off the console. Eris, eyes wide, was a whirlwind of nervous energy, her fingers dancing across her tablet. "The energy readings are spiking." "Chuck, the failsafe. It's been overridden." Blackwood initiated a self-destruct sequence. "How long?" 3 minutes? And, "Oh God, Chuck, the temporal distortion is increasing exponentially. We need to shut it down now." He didn't need her to spell it out. 3 minutes until the world ended, starting with them. He ripped a control panel off the device, sparks flying. The operatives, groaning and disoriented, tried to rise. 1 managed to raise his weapon, but a swift chop to the throat silenced him permanently. Chuck wasn't playing games, he needed control. "Now," Eris, still frantically tapping away at her tablet, shouted. "I'm trying to reroute the primary control matrix, but the encryption is insane. It's like nothing I've ever seen." Chuck's eyes narrowed. He couldn't decipher alien code, but he could sure as hell improvise. He grabbed the severed power cable, its exposed wires spitting electricity. With a grunt, he jammed the wires into a different port, bypassing the intended function. Warning lights flared. The hum escalated into a deafening roar, and the vortex within the core pulsed erratically. "Chuck, what are you doing?" Eris screamed, her voice barely audible above the chaos. "You'll overload the system." "Maybe," Chuck replied, his voice grim. "But I'm betting Blackwood didn't plan for anyone to jury-rig his doomsday device with a rusty pair of pliers." The holographic Blackwood's image flickered violently. "You dare interfere? You pathetic, primitive." Chuck ignored him, his attention solely on the device. He needed Eris. "There's a feedback loop forming. Eris, I need you to modulate the temporal frequency." Eris, despite her terror, understood. This was her domain. She dove back into her tablet, her fingers flying across the screen. "Give me the frequency range. Now." Chuck rattled off the readings he was getting from the jury-rigged panel. Eris's face was illuminated by the screen's glow, her brow furrowed in concentration. Almost. Got it. Inputting the counter frequency." The device shuddered violently, the roaring escalating into a piercing whine. The two operatives, now fully recovered, charged at Chuck. Time seemed to slow. He sidestepped the first, using his momentum to throw him into the second. They crashed into the device, knocking it precariously. Eris! Now! Eris hit enter. The whine reached a crescendo, then abruptly stopped. A wave of icy air washed over the room. The vortex within the core solidified, becoming a swirling sculpture of frozen light. The two operatives were frozen mid-charge, their faces contorted in expressions of terror and rage. Even Blackwood's holographic projection froze, his malevolent grin suspended in time. A bubble of distorted time now encased the room, trapping everyone and everything within its icy grip. Chuck, breathing heavily, approached the frozen Blackwood. The hologram was static, but the palpable sense of his hatred remained. You wanted to play with time, Blackwood? Now you're stuck in it. He turned to Eris, who was trembling but alive. Did it work? Are they? Frozen, Eris confirmed, her voice shaky. They're trapped in a temporal loop, reliving this moment for as long as the device holds. Which hopefully is a very long time. Good enough, Chuck said. He turned his attention back to the space-time manipulator. The self-destruct sequence was still running, ticking down in frozen digits on the display. The device, despite being frozen in time, still posed a threat. He needed to disarm it permanently with careful precision. He located the power core, a pulsating sphere of pure energy. He ripped it from the device, severing the connection with a final, violent tug. The core, freed from its casing, thrummed in his hand, radiating an almost unbearable heat. Chuck, what are you going to do with that? Eris asked, fear etched on her face. Make sure Blackwood can't use it, Chuck replied, his voice grim. Ever. He looked at Eris. You need to get out of here. Eris. Go somewhere safe. This isn't over. But what about you? I'll be fine, Chuck said, a ghost of a smile playing on his lips. I always am. He turned and walked into the darkness, the stolen power core glowing in his hand, a beacon in the night. Eris watched him go, a mix of fear and gratitude swirling within her. She knew, with a chilling certainty, that Chuck Norris was the only thing standing between her and the end of the world, and right now, the fate of the world rested squarely on his shoulders.